Part 3. Hell is other people. If misery loves company, misery has company enough. Henry David Thoreau. 'Tis the only comfort of the miserable to have partners in their woes. Miguel de Cervantes. In Jean-Paul Sartre's play No Exit, a man is shown into a nicely appointed hotel room where he is eventually joined by two others. He understands that he has died and that this is hell, but there are no obvious means to torment him. Increasingly irritated by interactions with his companions, he comes to realize that the punishment in this place is simple human interaction. No flames, no boiling oil, just the constant presence of other people. This is torment enough. Sartre, it appears, was not much of an extrovert. Time for a thought experiment. Mentally list 5 standout occasions when you were particularly unhappy. Go on, I'll wait. Now, how many of those situations involve the behavior, presence, absence, or loss of other people? If you are like the majority, the answer is either most of them or all of them. Social relations are complex, shifting, and impermanent. This makes them potential wellsprings of both happiness and misery. Want to change how you feel? Change how you relate to others. In this section, then, let's list some of the more potent strategies for creating unhappiness via our relationships. One proviso. I have chosen to bypass a particularly rich vein of possibility. Romantic and marital relationships, some see the two as mutually exclusive, simply because they are so rife with ways to feel worse. No point in shooting fish in a barrel. Besides, some readers are not in such relationships, and it is preferable for all of the strategies in the book to be universally applicable, or as close to that lofty goal as can be achieved. For those wishing to manufacture relationship hell, however, do not despair. Most or all of the techniques listed in this section are easily utilized in the service of turning a perfectly good relationship misery, abandonment, or both. Lesson 21. Become an island unto yourself. We are a social species. Unlike bears or cougars, we are built to spend our time in groups. Alone on the savannah, we would never have lasted long. For most of human history, we appear to have lived in tribes of 75 to 150 people. Those who could not handle the complexity of the relationship would go off on their own. Lions need to eat, after all. Today we have created a world in which more than half the population lives in urban areas, over 75% in more developed countries. One would think that this would eradicate the unhappiness associated with isolation, but no. It turns out that we were not built to function best in groups of at least 75 to 150, but in groups between 75 and 150. There is a cost associated with being in bigger crowds. For one thing, the complexity of the relationships becomes astronomical as numbers rise. In a group of 3 people, there are 3 relationships: A with B, A with C, and B with C. A group of 4 has 6 relationships: AB, AC, AD, BC, BD, and CD. By the time we get to 100, there are 4,950 relationships. Probably too many to keep track of completely, but still within the firing range of humanity's remarkable social abilities. When we get to a city of just 50,000 people, however, the total number of relationships is 1,249,975,000. Over a billion. Incomprehensible to any of us, no matter what our social skills might be. We have to start walling them off. Not surprisingly, the urban environment is constructed precisely for this purpose. Modern housing developments often present a row of garages to the street, the houses hiding behind them as though sheltering from gunfire. Neighbours cannot see one another, let alone chat from their non-existent front porches. Residential developments such as these are described with the modern marketing term for isolation: privacy. And indeed, they are private. The first hint there may be problems next door is likely to be a fence-jumping odour of decaying flesh and some well-fed house cats. So once again, we have a path to misery that has been cleared, paved, and widened by our culture. You need only choose the on-ramp and accelerate down the road. In his book, Bowling Alone, Robert Putnam has documented the decline of social groups such as the Rotary Club, churches, and yes, bowling leagues in Western societies. This at a time of coincident rises in the rates of depression. The temptation to draw a link is overwhelming. In the years before satellite imagery, the government of British Columbia frequently employed college students to staff mountaintop forest fire watchtowers through the summers. Much of their time would be spent alone. Now abandoned and crumbling, these towers still sit at the summit of many hiking trails. To many job-hunting students, this seemed like an ideal and somewhat undemanding task. Every year, however, many of them would have been removed from their posts, desperately unhappy, having discovered that they simply were not cut out to be isolated from the tribe for such an extended period. It may seem impractical to pursue a strategy of isolation, given that it might appear to require a lonely cabin in the woods or on a mountaintop. Nothing could be further from the truth. As we have discussed, the modern urban environment is built specifically to facilitate isolation. You don't have to do anything at all in order to achieve your goal. We have managed to create privacy to such an extent that it takes considerable effort for city dwellers not to be isolated. Further, if they remain fixated directly on the goal of meeting people, they can accidentally join us on the path to misery. After all, how do you meet people? They can waltz down the street shaking hands with strangers, but this will only get them startled looks, not admiring friends. The direct approach fails more often than not. Those wanting to build a larger social network must put the goal of meeting people on the shelf and ask themselves, what else do I want in my life? Then they must pursue those other interests in such a way that they have human contact as a side effect. They have to join clubs, take night school classes, schedule outings, do volunteer work, play sports, and generally occupy significant portions of their time plotting on how to find, cultivate, and spend time with small sub-tribes within the urban crush. If they do not, many find that they can wander the streets of their neighborhoods for days and never run into anyone they know. The world of the internet, at first blush, seems designed to overcome isolation. The various social media platforms allow us to connect instantly with innumerable people all over the world. We can build an online tribe based on arcane interests shared by no one in our hometowns. And indeed, some of our yens for contact can be met this way. But if you think of the social diet as being composed of various vitamins, some of the most essential ones are missed in online connection: genuineness, non-verbal communication, face-to-face contact, and more. Sit alone in your basement discussing Russian prehistory, or perhaps more likely, killing other people's wargame avatars, or watching cat videos, and you'll develop a misery-inducing deficiency quite quickly. So build an island, put up the fence, close the garage door, switch on the computer and kid yourself that you have substituted in the flesh social contact with the pixelated kind. It is one of the most effective routes to unhappiness that exists.